my name is Karen Saintville, and we are here today with Jeff Klazen, who is partner at Kobre and Kim LLP, and we are at the 2026 Distressed Investing Summit hosted by the M&A Advisor. Thank you, Jeff, for being here with us today. And we have a couple of questions for you. Can you tell us a little about what you've been focusing on lately at Kobre and Kim?
Yeah, well, hello. My general practice is aimed at asset recovery and helping clients monetize claims. Mm-hmm. In other words, they have a dispute brewing. How do they make sure that they can recover as much as they can at the back end? And to be clear, that's from a legal perspective. So we're a law firm. If you cannot work things out in a sort of a business sense or in a restructuring, you come to us and we can try to help you recover as much money as you can in the back end. So that's my general practice, and I focus that in lots of different areas, which includes, lending. It includes investor-state disputes where investors have claims against states that seize their assets. We see it in all kinds of different situations.
Incredible. And a topic of discussion at the summit today is private credit and how to prevent distress situations. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess this is a summit about distressed investing, so you can't really prevent distress necessarily, but we have learned some lessons from our work recovering assets to to inform how lenders can better protect themselves against situations where a loan may go into default and there's ultimately no recovery at the back end. So some of those lessons include getting personal guarantees from maybe the founder, entrepreneur who is obtaining the loan, so that you have essentially a secondary source of recovery. So if you cannot recover from the borrower, which often is a company or a special purpose vehicle, then you could still recover against the actual person behind the company, the founder, the entrepreneur, sometimes other people, family members or other resourceful people. So that, I think that is an important piece of a private credit transaction, certainly in sort of the middle market segment, and then using that to collect from that individual if necessary, if the loan goes bad. I think another important part along the way is really trying to monitor the financial situation of the borrower, which is not an easy thing to do, but it depends a lot on what rights you've secured in the loan to get insight into the financials. Do you have a right to inspect bank accounts? Do you have a right to get documentation about how assets are owned? So that along the way, either at origination of the loan or during the course of the loan process, you can kind of monitor what the asset picture is of the borrower, so that if you're seeing red flags, maybe because assets are being moved, or bank accounts are being depleted, that you can step in sooner and say, wait a second, looks like we're heading towards a default scenario. We need to strike some new deal, as opposed to, continuing to extend the loan, and then at the end, there's just no money left.
Right. Thank you for that insight. And last question, what are some of the ways in which private credit lenders can protect themselves in default scenarios?
Right. So when you get to the point where there is a default, right, which unfortunately happens, then what do you do? And so one way is to essentially try to enforce the claims that you have, to go to court to get a judgment. And then, how do you then recover on that actual judgment? And that's a lot of what I do. So that can involve, freezing assets in advance of getting a judgment. And some countries lend themselves better for that than others. So, for example, the U.S. actually is not easy to do that, but we've secured asset freezes in certain European countries, in certain Caribbean countries, to essentially make sure that we have the valuable assets locked down, so that we can at least get some collection from them eventually, as opposed to the risk that they get sold or dissipated otherwise. Then other things you can do is get receivers appointed in some countries to essentially take control of assets, to try to monetize them. In Dubai, you can get a travel ban against somebody who is a debtor. So if you get a judgment against them, you can get a court to order them. They cannot leave Dubai, which, depending on the person and the situation, may be more of an impediment than not. But all of these, there's all kinds of tools available around the world to try to, recover assets and and put lawful pressure on a debtor to essentially come to the settlement table and make sure you can still get a recovery. So.
Wow. Well, Jeff, thank you for your time, for your information, and hope you have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for tuning into M&A TV. If this episode enhanced your strategic outlook, please like, subscribe, and share it with your network. For more critical insights and high-level interviews, follow us on all our socials and visit our hub at www.maadvisor.com. I'm Roger Argonaldo, and we'll see you next time right here on M&A TV, the definitive voice of dealmakers.